Imagine waking up one morning and everything has changed. Your phone displays no service, your credit card is declined, and the only thing you hear on the radio is emergency broadcasts. Chaos erupts in the streets, people stand in long lines outside supermarkets, while world leaders deliver grim speeches about national security and global threats. The news is filled with images of missile strikes, mass evacuations, and crashing stock markets. The world as you knew it no longer exists. A global war has begun. Back in 2019, could you have predicted that a pandemic would bring the global economy to its knees? At the beginning of 2022, would you have imagined that Europe would witness a large-scale war? Why does it feel like the world is spiraling into an escalation no one can stop? The truth is, our world is more unstable today than ever before. Multiple global conflicts are overlapping, and each of these crises has the potential to escalate into the next great war. But why is this happening now? Who are the real beneficiaries of this instability, and what does it mean for you? Stay until the end of this video because some of the information you're about to hear might change your perspective on the world forever. Ukraine, a proxy war between superpowers? Since 2022, war has been raging in Ukraine, but is this really just a conflict between two nations, or is this war actually a proxy battle between NATO and Russia? Russia views Ukraine as part of its historical sphere of influence, while the West argues that Ukraine, as a sovereign nation, has the right to determine its own future. But if this is only about geopolitical interests, why are tens of billions of dollars being funneled into this war every year? Why are increasingly advanced weapon systems being supplied instead of serious diplomatic efforts being made? The real danger of this war lies in uncontrolled escalation. What happens if Western weapons hit a strategic target inside Russia? Would Moscow resort to more drastic measures? And if so, how would the West respond? Is Europe on the brink of being drawn even deeper into this conflict? China and Taiwan, the next global flashpoint? While the world focuses on Europe, an even greater crisis may be looming in the Pacific. China considers Taiwan a breakaway province and has repeatedly declared that reunification is inevitable, by force if necessary. Taiwan produces 65% of the world's semiconductor chips, essential components for smartphones, cars, computers, and even modern weapon systems. If this production were to stop tomorrow, the global economy could grind to a halt within weeks. But what happens if the US actually intervenes as it has promised? Would this trigger a direct war between two superpowers? What do you think? Will China invade Taiwan in the coming years, or will it remain a war of threats and intimidation? Cyber warfare and artificial intelligence, the invisible threat. While the world focuses on physical wars with tanks, missiles, and soldiers, the most dangerous war is already being waged in the shadows through cyber attacks and artificial intelligence. You might be thinking, cyber war? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. But the reality is, cyber attacks are just as destructive as physical bombs, perhaps even more dangerous. Imagine waking up, turning on your phone and seeing no service. ATMs are down, power outages cripple entire cities, and supermarkets can't process payments. Chaos erupts, and no one knows why. This is exactly the scenario that experts have been warning about for years. A coordinated cyber attack could cripple an entire nation within hours, without a single missile being fired. Did you know that there have already been multiple large-scale cyber attacks on critical infrastructure? In 2010, the Iranian nuclear program was sabotaged by the Stuxnet virus, a digital weapon that precisely targeted industrial control systems. In 2015, Ukraine's entire power grid was shut down by a cyber attack, allegedly carried out by Russian hackers. In 2021, a cyber attack paralyzed the largest U.S. fuel pipeline, leading to panic buying and nationwide shortages. But this is only the beginning. With the rapid development of artificial intelligence, warfare is entering a new era. Autonomous drones, AI-driven cyber attacks, automated target recognition systems. We are stepping into a future where machines themselves make life and death decisions. Think about it. What happens if an AI makes a mistake? What if it misinterprets an attack as a threat and retaliates? We are living in a world where controlling digital weapons is just as crucial as controlling nuclear weapons. But while nuclear arms are heavily regulated, AI-driven warfare is advancing at an alarming pace, often without public debate. Now, here's a question for you. How dangerous do you think it is that more and more war technology is being handed over to machines? Are AI and cyber warfare the new weapons of mass destruction? The Middle East, a ticking time bomb. While the world focuses on Europe and Asia, one of the oldest conflict regions continues to simmer: the Middle East, a region where religious, geopolitical, and economic interests have clashed for decades. For years, tensions between Israel and Iran have been escalating. Israel views Iran's nuclear program as an existential threat and has repeatedly made it clear that it will not tolerate an Iranian nuclear bomb. Iran, on the other hand, sees itself threatened by Israel and its allies, particularly the United States. The question is no longer if this conflict will escalate, but when and how. Consider the following scenarios. What happens if Israel launches a preemptive strike against Iranian nuclear facilities just as it did against Iraq in 1981? Would Iran retaliate immediately with missile strikes on Israeli cities? Would regional actors like Hezbollah, the Houthi rebels, or even Russia get involved? A war in the Middle East wouldn't just affect the region, it could throw the entire global economy into crisis. Why? Because the Middle East is the world's most critical energy source. Over 60% of the world's oil supply comes from this region. What would happen if Iran retaliated by blocking the Strait of Hormuz, the most vital waterway for global oil trade? Within days, oil prices would skyrocket, businesses would collapse, and supply chains would break down. Think that's unlikely? Then remember the 1970s oil crisis. Back then, oil prices quadrupled due to an OPEC embargo, plunging the world economy into recession. Now imagine what would happen if oil deliveries were physically blocked, not for weeks, but for months or even years. The consequences would be catastrophic. But the Middle East conflict isn't just about economics, it also has serious geopolitical implications. The US has maintained a military presence in the Middle East for decades. If Israel and Iran go to war, would that drag the US directly into the conflict? Would other countries like China or Russia step in to protect their own interests? Who really profits from these wars? For most people, war is tragedy, but for some, it's a multi-billion-dollar business. While soldiers die on the battlefield and civilians are trapped in the ruins of their cities, there are powerful players who benefit from it all. The global defense industry is seeing record-breaking profits. In 2023 alone, global military spending exceeded $2.4 trillion, more than at any point in history. The stock prices of arms manufacturers like Lockheed Martin, Rheinmetall, and Boeing have surged since the war in Ukraine began. The more uncertainty, the higher the demand for weapons. But why is that? And more importantly, who keeps this system running? Think about it. Why do some wars never really end? Why do new conflicts arise just as others seem to be resolved? Is it because global powers genuinely want peace, or because instability is simply too profitable? And it's not just weapons manufacturers. Energy companies also make billions whenever tensions in the Middle East or Eastern Europe drive oil prices up. Every time a new conflict breaks out, energy prices surge, along with the profits of the world's biggest oil and gas producers. In 2022, ExxonMobil reported a record profit of $55 billion, the highest in its history thanks to the Ukraine crisis. Then there's the financial markets. Hedge funds and investment banks bet on economic crises. When instability shakes the markets, insiders know exactly where to invest to make billions, while the average person loses everything. So ask yourself, are some conflicts really just random, or are they deliberately engineered for economic gain? What do you think? Who benefits the most from global instability? Is this all just coincidence, or is there something more behind it? The role of the media. Who controls our perception? War isn't just fought with weapons, it's also fought with information. Whoever controls the media controls public opinion. Throughout history, propaganda has been used in every major war to sway public support. But what about today? Do we live in an era where the media finally reports neutrally? Or have they long become part of a much bigger game? Every global power, whether it's the US, Russia, China, or Europe, has its own media networks, each presenting vastly different versions of reality. Why do some news agencies barely cover certain topics, while others focus on them relentlessly? Why do some countries always appear as the good guys and others as the villains, depending on which channel you're watching? In a world where deepfake technology, social media algorithms, and AI-generated fake news are becoming more convincing by the day, one crucial question arises. Can we even distinguish truth from deception anymore? Think about it. How do the media shape your perception of geopolitical conflicts? Do you believe you're getting the full truth, or just a carefully selected part of it? And one more thing. Do you think it's possible to manipulate public opinion to the point where an entire society supports a war it never actually wanted? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear your perspective. Is there still hope? With all these crises, Ukraine, Taiwan, the Middle East, cyber warfare, economic instability, one crucial question remains. Is there still a way back? Can we prevent a global war, or have we already crossed the point of no return? History has shown that diplomacy has prevented wars before, but are we still capable of finding diplomatic solutions today, or have the lines already been drawn so deeply that confrontation is inevitable? One key lesson from the past is this: wars don't just happen overnight, they are prepared long in advance. Societies are gradually conditioned for conflict, pulled to one side through media and rhetoric until escalation seems unavoidable. But is it really? So here's the big question. As a society, are we still capable of diffusing conflicts? Or are we already too far down a path that will inevitably lead to global war? What can you do? After all this information, one critical question remains. Are we as ordinary citizens powerless, or do we actually have influence? Many people believe that major geopolitical decisions are beyond their control. But the truth is, public opinion holds more power than most realize. That's why it's so important not to blindly believe everything we hear, but to verify information from multiple sources. Even more crucial, engage in discussions, share knowledge, and ask who truly benefits from instability and who doesn't. Now it's your turn. What do you think? Can we still prevent an escalation, or is global war inevitable? What's the next crisis that no one is paying attention to yet? Subscribe to this channel for more in-depth analyses, because knowledge is our most powerful weapon.